So for this video, I am going to show you how to start a basic character head. So it's important that we get the shape of the head correct as we go forward. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to hold Control and Shift and click on my brush over here and select the Trim Rectangle brush. And Trim Rectangle, if you hold Control and Shift, click and drag, it just cuts whatever it is that you have selected out completely. So I'm going to cut about that far into my sphere. So I'm going to go and find my Mirror and Weld button and click Mirror and Weld. So once we cut our sides off of our head here like this, we want to go to our side view, hold Shift and click and drag to snap to side view. And if we just hold Control and click outside of our object, it will mask everything. Hold Control and Alt to unmask, and we'll unmask just this portion here. So if we look, it's pretty symmetrical. I'm gonna do that one more time just to get rid of that little piece right there. There we go. So from the side view, use our move brush and just pull this down. And if you want to change the size of your brush on the fly, you can hold S. So once we drag down the chin a little bit here, we'll go to the front of the face and we're going to pull this in just slightly and hold Shift to kind of smooth this out a little bit. Now if we unmask everything, we look at our head, it's looking pretty thin. So we're going to stick with our move brush here and get our size pretty big and pull this out to the sides. And like that. And just use our smooth brush just once or twice to kind of, so when we're looking at our head here, I'm actually going to be looking at sort of like a side angle here. Also for reference, when you're starting a head, you can use this little icon up here in the top corner. It's also a very good way just to kind of see the general proportions of, or the planes of the face, and sort of a general idea of how the head is shaped. So even from this angle here, now we're just going to kind of go around our object and use the move brush to get things in position, kind of in the correct shape that they should be. It doesn't have to be exact. We just kind of want to make sure that the skull has the peak here at the top, and that at the back it angles down, angles back in here. So we're just looking for sort of those identifying angles and some of the main parts of it. Sorry, talking and sculpting is a little difficult to do at the same time, but so the top of the skull here is a little bit of a point. The nice thing about cutting off the sides of the sphere is now you see this line coming down here. This is going to become our temporal ridge, where we are going to start sculpting in the eye sockets. And I want to identify kind of where the middle of the face is, because the eyes are always in the center of the face. That's just a general rule about face proportions. So just take the Damien standard, and I'm just going to carve in a line right about, just kind of eyeball it, like right in the center of the face. And that's going to be my eye line. So this is a great way to identify where your eyes are going to be, and a great way just to kind of start the head in general. So now that we have our eye line identified here, let's just put a little bit of something in the middle here for the nose. And this is just going to be right where the nose sits. It doesn't have to be an actual nose. So it's really important to work low poly like this, especially starting out. Because if you were to subdivide your model, like if you hit Control D, you can see that your poly, your active points, quadruples. So if I were to hit Control D a bunch of times because I'm like, oh, I don't have enough geometry, the downside to this, to having too much geometry, is your brush has less effect, and also you're left with a lot of extra geometry, and it makes your model look kind of lumpy. So it's important to just start low poly and use very simple brushes like the move brush to just manipulate your shapes and kind of put things in place like that. Like the nose can just be a simple set of shapes, doesn't even have to be complicated. And just using the move brush, I can get all these kind of in place here. We can even start like the makings of our nasal bone right here. Get that into place. And I'm just using the move brush just to kind of get the basic shape of the nose. And if we look at our reference images here, we can see that the nose is thinner at the top and it tapers out toward the bottom a little more, of course. So also with the nose, which we'll get into another video, the nose should always have a bottom plane like this. Or a bottom facing set of polygons. So there should be an angle to it, like about 60 degrees or so. Anyway, now we just need to take our clay brush and put in a little bit of a a build up right here, which is going to be for the mouth. Also with the zygomatic, you want to come up here along the sides and underneath where the eye sockets are going to be. And you're just going to build up those cheeks a little bit. And I'm just using the clay brush, just lightly kind of building this shape as we go. The zygomatic is the cheekbone right here, and it is part of the widest part of the face, and it travels back a little bit here toward the ear. And when you're looking at the skull or the head from the side, the ear always lands right in the center of the head right here. So we're just, for now, I'm just going to place a little marker. The ear always lines up with the top of the eyebrows right here and around the bottom of the nose. So for now, that's just going to be my marker for the ears. So I'm just trying to get all of my place markers in when I'm starting my head. I'm not trying to do any details. I'm just trying to block out the big shapes first and make everything, get everything into place. Now if we take our move brush, make this a little bigger, that temporal ridge, which was supposed to be up above the eye sockets, which is right here on the temples, you can pull that in just a little bit and it creates that nice little ridge right here. And the shape of the skull. So it really is just using a ton of reference images and practicing this. Obviously I've done this a lot of times, so it's a little easier for me to just kind of get on autopilot and just kind of keep going and blocking everything in. But if you're having trouble, of course, just remember that you're only trying to put placeholders. You're not trying to do any detail at this phase. There should be no details going into your sculpt. It's only trying to get a foundation for the head. So now, from the side view, just going to pull this in, get that shape of the back of the skull coming down. And this, when the skull wraps around here, it lines up kind of at the bottom of the ear. So we can just kind of pull this up and shape our jaw just a little bit here. And on female characters, the jaw is a lot softer of an angle. And you'll notice here too in this reference image, if we zoom in on this, the angle of the jaw lines up with the ear. So the ear actually travels down in this direction, and so does this angle of the jaw before it turns here at the corner. So the angle of the ear matches the angle of the jaw going up this direction. And then, of course, a soft angle at the corner there, traveling down. Now we need to get our eye sockets into place. So let's look here at some of our reference. And the eye sockets, so the eyes, when you're, let's grab the clay build-up brush, the eyes are always about, and I'm just holding Alt and just carving in here. The eyes are always about one eye distance apart from one another, but when you're doing the skull, that's a little bit different. Because the eye sockets for the skull are rather large. So they are actually going to sit underneath this brow here. We want to make sure that our eye socket is kind of preserved, because that's going to help us sculpt the eyes later. So we can just kind of get this general shape of the eye sockets in here. And we'll pull the cheeks out a little bit, and notice her cheekbones are a little more prominent here on the sides. So this looks so bad. But that's okay. That's normal. When you're sculpting anything, you're always going to go through a phase of it looking kind of awkward and looking kind of bad for a while until you get things in place. And that's why it's important to get your foundation correct before you move forward with any details, because then the rest of your sculpt is just going to be that much better. I think at this point we have some of our landmarks in place, enough of them to subdivide up. So right now I'm at 2000 active points. So I'm going to hit Control D, and that's going to give me a little more geometry. The nice thing about going up in subdivision like this is it creates a subdivision level. So if you're not familiar with how Zbrush treats subdivision under geometry, you have your subdivision levels. So as many times as you press Control D, it creates a subdivision level. So I can go back down to level 1 at 2,500 points, or I can click and drag and go up to level 2 whenever I want. And the advantage of this is I can work on slightly higher geometry on my higher level for a little finer detail. And if I feel like something is out of place, I can always just go down to level 1. And you can switch back and forth between your subdivision levels by hitting D to go up, or holding Shift and pressing D to go down a subdivision level. So up, press D, Shift D goes down. And so it's really nice to be able to switch between the low poly and just being able to move things around really quickly, and then pressing D to go up and getting slightly higher geometry. So we're just going to go around and smooth out a little bit of this. I'm on my second subdivision level. Also from the side, I want to make sure that my brow comes out a little bit from the face and that this angles down at this sort of an angle, because the skull, the eye sockets are shaped at sort of a downward angle. And it's okay if you're always going to have to make adjustments. It's okay to just be constantly adjusting, because sculpting takes a long time. It just takes a lot of looking at reference and a lot of time and patience. So, and just learning the shapes. Learning the shapes is hard. It's not easy to replicate this stuff, especially if you haven't done it before. So it just takes a lot of looking and practicing, making sure here that this outside corner of the eye socket is coming up and then over, and then connecting to that temporal ridge in the forehead right here. For right now, I just want to make sure that I have a good foundation moving forward, because it's going to make it a lot easier for us later on. So we got this nice little corner here for the eye socket, and it comes in here at the corner of the eye and back out at the cheek again. We'll build that up a little bit. And from the nose, you also have this that wraps down and around the mouth. So we want to make sure that we just have a little bit of volume there coming down. Let's pull this stuff back here. Sorry, I'm just staying focused, staring at my reference here, making sure that I'm checking what I'm doing. Everything is kind of in the right place here. Now I'm just using the move brush. Not going crazy, just tiny movements, tiny tweaks. You can always add, you can always go back. So I'm just taking my time and making sure that my foundation is good. And if it's too difficult to move something, I can hit Shift D to go down in subdivision, and just use my lower subdivision level to move my points around if I feel like the nose is out of place or isn't working right or something. The zygomatic, or the cheekbones, are kind of flat facing forward, and they face forward at almost kind of a downward angle, but there's also fat on top of that. So in a way, you can almost carve that in by doing the shape of the mouth right here, coming in the front here, and then carving out in sort of like a T shape, almost like that, to come up and out to the sides. One very important thing moving forward before we go into the next video is make sure the shape of your skull is correct from the front here. So if you don't have that arch, the temporal ridge from this corner here of the eye socket, make sure that you get that in there. And it's a very gradual, it's very soft, the way that it transitions from this corner here up into the skull. But it's very important that you have that, because it's one of the major identifiers, one of the major bony landmarks of the face. And make sure that it curves in just a little bit. Make sure you have your cheeks in place. And make sure that the mouth is sort of bulbing out a little bit in the front. Watch the angle of your jaw here to make sure that it travels at not a 90-degree angle. It's not straight up and down. It's back at like a 45-degree angle. And same thing with the jaw traveling to the front here. It's not a 90-degree angle. It's not straight. It comes down and forward at about a 45-degree angle. And look at your chin from the bottom. Make sure that the shape of your bottom jaw here is accurate and is in a more of a horseshoe sort of shape, or like a boomerang sort of shape. And from the side view, if you're looking at your skull, it's more of an egg shape, traveling back toward the back of the head like this. It's not perfectly round. So if your sphere is still very, very round, you know, if it looks more like this, just make sure that you are pulling out the back of the head a little further, because this is called the widow's peak. and or one of the, like the top of a forehead, or basically the hairline, and it travels up at an angle up to the highest part of the skull, which is at the top here near the center, and then from the center top travels down and back and has sort of a sharp sort of angle here where it changes direction and comes down and in like that. So the skull has all of these subtle shapes in it, but it starts here at the widow's peak, travels up and back, and then at the top of the skull travels down and back. And you can see that from a lot of reference images. And even in this little demo head here, same angle that travels up and down and around and curves in toward where the neck connects at the base of the skull. So this right here is where it curves in.